Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
You're going to be okay. You're not different. You don't have to prove anything. You look at the photos of me in those years. I always have a tough look on my face. I always look like I'm going to fight somebody, and that's just insecurity. You're knowing you're fine, you're smart, and you're super capable, and you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Would have been really nice. I just needed to hammer it into my head maybe a little bit more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that you can be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today, we're chatting with Jon Hunter, a coach, advisor, ex-public company chief revenue officer, and a proud father of 4 children. Jon spoke about his childhood, growing up with undiagnosed dyslexia amidst his super intelligent family members, climbing up the career ladder before the pandemic forced him to really focus on what matters in life. I know you'll enjoy this episode with Jon Hunter. Jon Hunter, welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Jon, you're someone who has a very long story, interesting story, I have to say. Before we go down to the details, can I just ask a very basic question? Who are you as a human, Jon?
Oh man. Wow. Um, I'm just one of you. I feel like I was thrown out of the average underdog train and found a way to make the best of it, to help people and to do stuff that a lot of people didn't think possible. So maybe I'm the underdog. I'm the represent the average person who wants to do something more than average and just kept going after it his whole life.
Yeah, awesome. Was that pursuit embedded from you from an early age?
Yeah, I think it is. My dad was a PhD in theology. My mom was a master's in English. My brother went to the #1 high school in the country. Sister was super smart. And I had a clear learning disability. I didn't know it at the time because my parents were so good at helping me to get through school. So if you read a lot of my posts and a lot of my content, I talk about this duality of thinking of this monk hitman combination of grit, grind, work, low entitlement, but also thinking and being empathetic and strategic. So I can take that all the way back to my childhood to where I didn't identify with my family and my siblings as much because test taking was very difficult. But I had such great parents that they helped me through that. So I picked it up later. And so I learned the other things early, being the underdog. Gosh, if I'm not great at school, I'm not going to amount to anything. And then, you kind of combine that edge with, hey, I still didn't quit on school, got my degree, learned how psychology worked and other elements. And so, yeah, I think I didn't realize it, but I think in hindsight, it was there from a very, very young age. And then I just started taking advantage of it and building on it later.
Making your weaknesses your superpower. That's awesome. When did you start realizing that it was a little bit different for you to learn things the way that your siblings did?
Well, I don't know, if how conscious I was on it at the time. I think in retrospect, I used to fight with my brother a lot. He's 11 months older than me, and he was a foreign alien to me. They were so smart. He'd play the piano. My sister would play the piano. They both lived in France, and I couldn't do any of that stuff. So I would just be with friends all the time. I'd be getting in trouble, riding dirt bikes, and living a different life. But so I probably knew it then, like I'm not like these people, But later, we started getting along really well. We started appreciating each other. Um, and then I think I realized that I have more here and we're gonna get along and make something out of this probably around the beginning of college, end of high school,
Yeah,
17, 18.
post the teenage years.
Yeah.
So there are three of you, two boys and one girl.
My sister's 2 years younger,
Oh
although she
wow.
skipped a grade and acts like she's 10 years older than me, tells me what to do. And my brother's 11 months. He's a hedge fund lawyer in New York, married to a cancer doctor, and Michigan law school, and Bowdoin and Harvard, and I always tell people I'm a lumber devil. I went to NAU in Flagstaff, Arizona, and in the fraternity, and got in a lot of trouble. I didn't do so well. I moved home to Phoenix, started all over again, had my dad right by my side, taught me how to learn. I get a criminal justice degree from ASU, which turned out to be a funny story later because I ended up getting an ASU Class Leader Award in 2017, honoring some of their more prominent grads. And the dean of the criminal justice department came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, we're so proud of you. You had this great business career, global companies, transformations. What made you choose criminal justice?" And I said, "Well, Dean,
Hmm.
Dean, you're not going to like to hear this answer, but it was because it was the least amount of math to get my degree. I was scientifically plotting my way to get my degree with this hitman attitude where
Yeah.
test taking was just so bad. But then I said, hold on a second. Let me tell you why it was an amazing degree. I said, your teachers taught me how to think critically about a difficult subject, which was juvenile justice in particular, how devastating it is to society. I wasn't learning about EBITDA and money and revenue. I was learning about solving societal problems from really good teachers. And then you picked up two things you use in business. I teach is statistics and psychology. I mean, it's summary level data and people. And so you combine critical thinking, summary level data, and psychology, you can run the world. And I didn't really know it at the time, but 2017, looking back, I said, "Oh, I'm so glad that I got my degree and that I got my degree in that subject." And she thought it was great.
That is awesome. Wow, I didn't think the two would actually, relate to each other. Um, so this podcast is intended for working parents who are juggling work and life demands, but I am quite curious now. How does interpreting statistical data and understanding how psychology works give you the superpower to run the world?
Well, when you're running your business, maybe you run your for everyone at home. I mean, I do it. I have 4 kids. I have a small city I'm running at home. My wife has to juggle teaching and charities and kids, and so you need to understand the basic patterns of data. I'm not a numbers guru. I would always have a chief financial officer, a bookkeeper at home to do the day to day. But my job is to really understand the strategic nature of patterns. And that is what statistics taught me in college. And I learned later as I was running these large companies. I didn't need to own every number. I needed to own the macro strategic numbers and understand how they're going, where they're going. So understanding statistics, I tell that to young people coming out every day. And then if you're going to lead people or influence, leadership to me is defined by your ability to influence. This can be at home, influencing your teachers, influencing your mayor, influencing your PTO, influencing your neighbors who are being a
Influencing
bit
your youngest?
your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the psychology that goes into raising, my kids are 25, 24, 4 and 21 and 17. And my one girl is 17, and it's totally a different dad role. I've had to make adjustments. It requires self-awareness, empathy, and self-control, which we get taught in business. I didn't get taught
Mm.
that at home. I got taught
Mm.
that in business when running large teams.
Mm.
And it blew me away that we weren't teaching this to my spouse or to the spouses, that we weren't taking all this really cool, powerful psychological training and teaching us how to be better parents, better neighbors, how to deal with life, how to be self-aware, which is probably the number one killer in at home and at work is just blind spots. And yeah, so I got hammered with that at work. We got trained probably 6 years of just LDP program, Dr. Lutai Pacific Institute, very formal, very rich, deep training. And it was later I learned how powerful that stuff is at home as it is transforming people at work. Psychology is everything.
Interesting. What are the three things that you have taken back home with your children?
Well, vulnerability. I mean, you want to build trust with the number one thing in business for anyone listening, how big or small your business is, it doesn't matter. If you have safety, you have productivity. If you have safety, it means you have trust. You have trust, you can say things in a more provocative way. You can be more truthful. If we don't have it, we hurt people. We have unintended consequences. So I can give you hundreds of examples of work where people come into a new business and they just start making changes and they start throwing words around that people maybe don't understand, and you hurt people and they may quit or they may revolt and you may not have the transformation you were hired to do. Well, it's the same thing I found at home, especially with kids as they got older. Dad saying he's sorry, dad saying he's sorry to his wife, dad saying, "Gosh, I can do better." Dad asking, "Hey, what are the three things you wish I did better?" And listening to them and them watching you, they're staring at you to be vulnerable. So, and a little bit more vulnerable, the more safety. And then
Yep.
they open up, "Oh, Dad, I'm really worried about, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, or I got all these friend issues going on." And you can't do that with just big, chunky time with them. You have to do it with a little time with them to build that safety and trust. And I traveled 400,000 miles in 2020, and it wasn't working. It was a mistake to think I was going to build that level of safety with my family being gone that much.
Yep.
And I'm very honest about that. But all those tools, self-awareness, empathy, and self-control, right? Letting your heart rate go up and start yelling at them, or losing your cool on anyone in front of them is hurtful. And it happens, and when it does, you own it. But yeah, I've had some really great breakthroughs by deploying the vulnerability and the emotional intelligence at home as much as I do it at work.
Yeah, I think Dr. Becky Kennedy touched upon this as well when she said sometimes it's okay for us to make the mistakes and because we will all do it. But it's how we recover afterwards. It's, as you mentioned before, explaining to them what happened, but then apologizing and then making sure you know what you're going to do next time to minimize things from happening again.
I'm sorry out of an adult, a true, genuine
Yeah,
apology,
yeah,
and then change behavior because
yeah.
right, it's manipulation if you don't.
Mm,
Um, Yeah, and I wasn't that self-aware in the beginning, like most people. I mean, it took me getting hammered at work from
mm.
360-degree surveys and a boss. I've had European and South African bosses who just hammer me that I'm being an idiot. And so, all of that just bluntness, and then
Yeah,
it changed. It changed. If you have the right self-esteem, it can change you where you don't take it as personally.
yeah.
And that allowed me to put my ego aside at home and say, golly, I messed up.
Yeah, awesome. You mentioned before that the way you parent your daughter, your youngest, was a little bit different from the rest.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your kids.
Well, they're all a little bit different, the oldest to the youngest. I have a bigger gap between my third boy, who's 21. So 21 to 17, the boys are 18 months apart. So in a
Mm.
weird way, I could just kind of throw this particular pattern after the three boys and get a decent connection,
Similar, yeah.
because it's like ding, ding, ding,
Yeah.
just metaphorically slapping them. And I tell a funny story. When my daughter was in the high chair, one of my things I did with the boys when they were in the high chair is I would snap my fingers, make a sound like, boys, no. They're throwing food or whatever, and they would adhere.
Yep.
And I remember my daughter 4 years later, I did the same thing, and she looked at me like, I don't know what she did. She started just throwing more food on the ground, and I went in, my whole system was now broken. I was totally screwed. And I said to my wife, you better get in here and handle this girl. And I needed a new playbook. I mean, I needed to start over, but um, she's
Yeah.
just they're all different. I don't know how much of it is male, female. I'm sure a certain amount of it is. I mean, certainly her development younger was she was programming our alarm system at probably 8 years old, where the
Mm.
boys couldn't match their socks until they were like 15. So it was watching her develop faster meant I needed to be more time with her.
Yep.
And then I went and invested in myself. I don't have all the answers. I read the books. I read the daddy-daughter books.
Mm.
I encouraged my wife to read the mom-son books that talk about the psychology between mothers and sons and dads and daughters. And it's that whole thing. My dad taught me how to learn. I just never let it go. I'm learning more now and than I've ever learned. And I'm 55 years old and I feel like I'm just beginning. So I think that is key to the whole thing, parenting, work, home, spouses, um, charities, is just being able to put more new ideas into your
Mm.
head and to not take things personally are critical factors. So yeah, we're still there. This is her senior year. So I'm we're really positive. We have some really good things going on, but this will be our last year with her at home.
Yeah. How has parenting all of your kids through their teenage phase like? And if there are any particular patterns that you observe with boys versus your girl as well?
The one thing is that there's one thing I always tell people in parenting, and it's Sesame Street simple, which is there's nothing that replaces time, time. And no one wants to hear it. What's the secret? It's time.
Mm.
It is the right time with her, knowing what her friends' names are, knowing what music she's listening to, being able to
Mm.
show that you're present, not on your phone, that you go to the concerts, that you do the things. Um, and the boys, it's similar, a bit different, but they know it too. When you're not paying attention and you really can't remember the boys' names, their friends, or if something happened to one of them, at the time for my boys, I was running, a multi-billion-dollar business, traveling all over the world, and still knew I wanted to be a great parent. So I would put the things on my calendar and be there at the big events. But I couldn't at some of those times, wasn't into the detail, and it would show with them. And so I think those years and I always the other thing I'll tell people is if you want to avoid some really bad stuff in the high school years, do the work in the earlier years because that's usually where you see a lot of self-esteem boundary
Mm.
mistakes made is letting them at 9, 10, 11, 12, giving them the phone or letting them talk back or make him their friend rather than you're the parent, studying what self-esteem really means, having them do great habits and behaviors and chores and disciplines that they're proud of. If those foundations are skipped, you'll see it and you have to repair it in high school. So it's a great reminder to they're not your we want to be buddies with them. I mean, it's so there's especially as they get older. But I always remind myself I have plenty of friends. My role with them is to be their parent
Yeah.
and time spent with them, and then just being. I tell you, with the boys, maybe a little bit too was just it was something I learned at work that I tend to be hardest on my best people. And
Mm.
so I had to remind myself to just being positively affirming even when they're doing great
Mm.
because I used to assume people knew I believed in them. And then
Mm.
I learned at work through surveys that, I wish John would give me more vulnerable one-on-one time. And so I use that at home. And it became really important around things like sports and friends and affirming. So I became really proactive with the boys from time to time out of nowhere. I would just say, son, it's just a game. And I want you to win. I hope you win. But
Mm,
ultimately, I would always tell them these are circumstances. They don't define you. And ultimately, I don't really care. I care
mm.
about you. And so I would always draw these circles on whiteboard. I had a big whiteboard, and I'd always draw circles. You, God, circumstances. And the circumstances are going to go up and down, and you don't have to go up and down with friends, sports, business, school. And I'm really glad I did that. It's set a foundation now that they're in more mature um, things in life that they don't identify with their failures, which
So where
is
was you and God in that picture, in that circles?
God's in the center first. God's the
And
center. Yeah, he's the one who validates you, whatever, not to get spiritual on people, but whatever people's God relationship is, on right and wrong and on forgiveness and peace and being in the present moment. Even myself, I tell my boys, I'm going to fail, I'm going to make mistakes. So like I said earlier, so don't use me all the time. If you're doing great, if dad had a bad day, I'm going to have a bad day. And ultimately, as you get older, you'll find that spiritual center to develop, and it'll help you just keep off the circumstantial ups and downs.
yeah, awesome. I grew up in a Catholic home, and my parents are both devout Catholics. And I think from a very early age, I remember my dad told me, you should never rely on people to make you happy because no one's going to be able to make you happy. Only God is going to be able to be that person or that wholeness that you are seeking. I think I was probably as young as maybe in primary school, which is year 1 to 6 here. But I'm interested because your dad was also a priest in his previous life, right? And so, how much was spirituality or theology and everything that is revolved in the spiritual realm? How much was that embedded in you from a very early age?
Well, I mean, that's a podcast unto itself. My dad was a 12-year Dominican priest. He's probably the most prominent thinker in the church in that particular order. If you go talk to the monks there now, his potential was astronomical. One of his students just reached out to me. She ran the divinity school at Harvard and got her PhD, and she talks about him speaking all these languages and teaching this very deep philosophical, spiritual nature. You can see old Bibles with Greek and Latin written in the deep, you know what I mean? So this is a whole nother level. And we rarely talked about it. Rarely. People knew, and my mom was a Sister of Mercy nun for 10 years,
Oh,
and they
wow.
fell in love and they got married and they started a family. And he was released from his vows. He left on really good terms, never talked ill of the church. He loved the work he did helping the poor. What I would tell you, the takeaway for you from my upbringing was they lived it. They lived the gospel. If you would have followed them around, you would have said, these are really kind, smart, genuinely in the present moment people who want to make the world a better place, who don't judge anybody, who love unconditionally, who've had that business success, and he would have failures, and he'd go bird watching, which he loved more than these other things. Loved being a dad, loved teaching. Um, and it was just, and he knew the right way to teach it, for me at least, was to live it, not to throw scripture at you, not to throw rules. And you can argue based on his background, he's as well educated on the topics as anybody in the world, and he rarely would go there unless you pulled it out of him, which I did. I took one of his classes. He taught a class called History of Religion at ASU when I was older. It was a 3-hour night class, and I took it. He taught all the religions very eloquently, very deeply, and the students loved him. And he just carried it with grace. And it was just a joy. I lost him too early. He died in 2005, and it was I wrote about it multiple times, how powerfully devastating it was. And but I'm carrying it on, trying to live that way, and trying to bring that kindness and bring that spirit of service is a big part of what I'm doing now.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. That's a very lovely. I wish I was able to attend his classes. I did see that post that you wrote about when your dad was passed and when he was ill, and then you kept your head in the corporate world's hand and kept on performing at a high level. How, looking back now, how would you relive those moments again?
I would like to tell myself that all of this competitiveness in the business, you can be successful without that level of intensity and that level of, it's hard to describe. I was like in a movement. I was in a cause. It was so subliminal. It was so, enveloped on me that I just didn't see it. It was just such a normal thing to get on and go to war, metaphorically, that I would tell myself that's not necessary. You can take time off, you can be vulnerable, you can get therapy, you can get counseling, you can change jobs, not a big deal. You know what I mean? Back in the day, you would have thought this stuff is and maybe due to my
It.
upbringing, yeah, maybe due to my upbringing, where if you grow up in a house where if you're not super smart, you equate it to not being successful in life and in business, you could see why you would hang on to all that business stuff like it's the end of your world because you don't think you're going to be capable of much without it. So,
Well,
you know,
you made it your identity. You wanted to show
100%.
the world that you are not that kid with the learning disabilities, that you are the person who is successful. But ironically, it goes back to that the soccer game that you explained to your son, right? Goes up and
Yeah.
down, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, your dad doesn't really care about it. He cares about you more than
He
what
did.
you were able to achieve.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, I mean, you look back on it, I'm pretty hard on myself. I was a pretty good dad. I was there and he was alive for that. So I had him, I always tell people I was Alexander the Great with Aristotle because I used to travel the world and burn cities down and be able to go sit with Aristotle and go, Dad, what about this and this? And he would walk me through. Then the kids started coming, and I was so proud. I met my kids because my dad was older because he was in the
Mm.
church. So I was always afraid. I was a short amount of time with him. So I was always trying to speed up connectivity to his knowledge and his connection to my kids. And so I think that's one reason why, I mean, until 2006, I was pretty good. Life was good
Mm.
on the outside because
Mm.
he's there and mom's there and we're down the street from each other and he's with my kids. And um, the biggest thing was not seeing that his health was declining because of that denial. That connection was so strong. When he really started declining, I think if I would have been in a better mental place, I would have seen that decline and I would have pulled out and been with him more. I should have been there more. I don't have a lot of shoulds, but if I could relive something, that last year I would have, oh boy, I need to be here with dad and tell just put the business completely gone, which is what I did with my mom. My mom passed this past March
Oh,
2024, and I was with her around the clock for the last 3 years. It was amazing. It was just an amazing opportunity, and I felt
mm.
so good. But I learned that from my dad.
What happened? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like you have a very strong and deep relationship with both of your parents. What is life like for you right now without them
Mhm.
being in the physical realm?
Yeah. Well, you're on your own. I tell people when they lose both parents, it's a very lonely fraternity, sorority to be in, for people. And not everyone had great parents. So you can't make the assumption everyone had the experience I did. But I look at it like they had given me the tools, and it's time to step up. Yeah, they played their role. It's in you. Believe in yourself and go do the things they taught you how to do for my kids, for the community. So I do a ton of charity work. I'm more like my dad today than I've ever been. And I think that makes me feel good. I don't operate anymore. I'm just starting my own business, helping people, teaching leadership, coaching, helping people resolve conflict. I teach in the inner city school, one class a week. I started a water program for the homeless in my neighborhood because they were, Arizona is extremely hot and they were just
Mm.
so I just ran out there with my kids. It started with backpacks, and it's grown into a bigger thing, and not a big thing. I'm not bragging about it, but it's something I wouldn't have done if I was in that corporate world where you just had to win. And people, oh, you're Jon Hunter, Chief Revenue Officer, and your title, and the money, and the plane trips, and the status. I
The
do give a
status
lot.
and the ego, right? It's all about the
So,
ego.
look,
Yeah.
and I would be lying to you if I was just so smart. I do attribute that to God that a pandemic was created to get John Hunter off of airplanes because he knew nothing else would. And go be with your kids, go be with your wife, and go start a business that you can do with joy and purpose. And I'm in a men's group now
Oh,
that we're
wow. Good for
yeah, I'm
you.
in a men's group with 8 other men that are kind of in a similar position, still in the capital markets, so still commercial businessmen, but want to really make sure that we're designing the second half of our life with purpose and strategic design. So that's been really, really fun, and I'm learning a lot in that group.
Mm.
It's it's really powerful.
It sounds like you're in a really good place. How long did it take you to get there from the moment the pandemic happened and they shut down all of the airports around the world?
It was terrible. I tell people I was Moses in the desert for 4 years, just wandering, feeling like a loser,
A
and
lot shorter than than Moses,
yeah,
so.
but it was really a walkabout. It was really a wandering trial and error, dopamine learning, where are the meetings, where are the phone calls. Ironically, that was the biggest post I've written was my death. I wrote a post with a tombstone. If you saw it, John
Mm.
Hunter died in 2020 and with
Chasing a
EBITDA.
bit, yeah.
And people, I probably have 400 people call me. How did you get out? How are you
Mm.
so smart? You're so easy. How'd you do it? I'm stuck. I'll never get out. And I was
Mm.
like, no, that was me. There's no way was going to get out. Everything was tied up in that 10,000 square foot home, tons of stuff, tons of complexities. It's just easier to plug back into the matrix as the movie goes. And so it was an up and down 2020 to 2024.
Mm.
Not all of it just in pain, but definitely figuring it out, doing a little bit of coaching, doing some advising work, doing some charity stuff, going to a conference, reading, getting coaches. I've been coached by many to help me find my talent and what I want to do with the rest of my life, and just believing in myself. And then slowly, and then you have these mini breakthroughs. And I probably had a big breakthrough, this past, you know, beginning of the year, or maybe end of last year, 2024, where I really realized what helped me write those two posts was I really didn't care what anyone thought about me anymore, deeply. I almost deleted both of them 7 times. I'm like, oh my, people are going to say, oh, look at John Hunter. He's going through a midlife crisis. Well, why isn't he buttoned down? Why isn't he more the corporate? And I literally said to myself, why do I care? I don't know any of these people. I don't owe them anything.
Mm.
And ever since that elevation, my writing and my business ideas and my friendships, they're all kind of coming out of that lens, which is
Mm.
I just need to be my true authentic self,
Mm.
and from there, let the chips fall where they may.
Yep.
And that since I got to that place in the last 6, 9 months, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, a lot of
Midlife
fun.
chrysalis, they call
Yeah.
it. now. It's
Okay.
it's not so much a
Oh,
crisis, it's a refocus, reinvention, letting go of the old skin, shedding the old skin that doesn't serve you anymore, and then just living to your true purpose. That is awesome, John.
yeah, it just took for me, it took a metamorphosis. It took the Kafka coming out or the skin of the snake and it just, I would say, why isn't it happening faster? Or
Yeah.
and then you compare yourself. Well, that guy figured it out in 6 months. And you hear people say, oh,
Well,
you
you
should
you think it was 6 months, but for them it was way
months.
longer, right? It's all
Exactly.
about,
You
yeah.
you learn all about cognitive distortions and psychology and dopamine and chemicals and it's the other post I wrote recently was I compared coming out of a big job as a
Mm.
scuba diver coming up from the depth and
Yes, I
that
saw that too. Yeah, nice.
and if you come up too fast you get the bends. I'm not a scuba diver but I've studied it and I've seen people that call me and they have the bends.
Mm,
I had the bends, I would
mm,
argue at one point. I
mm,
was just like, I need to talk to people, I need to work, I need to be identified. And so, no, 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 just take a break,
mm,
go to yoga, go on a hike,
mm.
go do some charity work, journal, reconnect with who you are, go back to those friends from college and high school. And people do, that's what I did. They have good stories, but there are others that will go right back in because it's so painful. And I get it. And so, yeah, that was a really good exercise for me, touching base and being able to help people with my story who felt similarly and that they want to get out, but they can't. That was really cool work. I've done a bunch of work from that, and it's been meaningful.
Mm. What is the one thing that you think they would have to really come to light with in terms of getting out of that hamster wheel to finally focus on the life that they want to live?
Well, I think it's identifying where does the validating from other stuff come from. I think everyone should truly keep an eye on that. There's nothing wrong. You don't have to be in therapy, but understanding everyone has some inner child activities from their child. Everybody, every parent is flawed one way or the other. I will budget money right now for all of my kids to have counseling and therapy if they ever need it, because I'm going to screw up. I am going to leave them with some kind of inner child. What did John,
I
Dad
mean,
do?
that would be nice. Yeah, because
You
therapies
know?
cost a lot.
And you don't put a stigma on it, like there's something wrong
Yeah.
with you and that you're
Yeah.
weird. And so I think everybody, you usually see people with it's a money thing. It's never enough. My dad validated me with money. Things, this country in particular right now, and the whole big trend in getting rich quick and being successful and a bunch of me stuff going on, not a lot of us. And so I think that all combined will put you into a meat grinder. And unfortunately, you actually do worse at your job when you're in that position. You don't do better at it. You do it worse because your self-esteem is low. You're not working out. You're not going to yoga. You're not letting things slide off your back. And then your psychology at work just becomes absolutely intolerable. And so it's a weird double-edged sword. It's a weird paradox, which is I better stay in there. I need this job. I need this money. And then it's that same pressure to hold on to it that kills it. And so I just think everyone should try to understand themselves at the very least of where some of that comes from and then challenge it. That's really you're really not your job, and freeing yourself from that gives you better access. I'm not telling you need to do what I'm doing. I'm just saying if you disconnect from that, you'll actually be better at it because you won't attach to the outcome, which means you'll go for it. And if it doesn't happen, who cares? We'll try again another way. And I think that's how I've been framing it for people is detaching from the outcome isn't saying go do charity work the rest of your life. It's just saying this is a better way for you to actually get reconnected to probably who you were back in your 20s and 30s if you're in your 50s. And and when people do that, I've seen some pretty good success stories when people, oh yeah, they kind of reconnected the fire when they didn't care about the outcome. And I
Yeah.
certainly have a lot of that in me.
Yeah. It's going back to that playing to win as opposed to playing to not
Not
lose mentality. That's so awesome.
I was telling someone the other day, I was known in the early days of my career to tell openly to management, like, I don't care, fire me. I'm an up or out guy. My self-esteem was really high. I didn't ever identify with it. I didn't have any money. Um, and I have so much confidence. And it's just funny, as you get up more and more and more, and your family grows. It's a
Mm.
post I'm going to do pretty soon. And I'm going to do this post about the danger zone. The danger zone for me was 2000 to 2006, where I had all these boys back to back to back, and my job grew really, really significantly. So I go from really one child, small business to three kids with 10x pressure business. And that's where I think, began, where some of that started to go away, because now you're
Mm.
going, "Oh, I've got the big family, I have the commitments, I have the schools, I have the summer camps, I have it all. I better protect this thing and
You have more
grow it.
to lose. Yeah.
To lose, next thing you know, that playing to win starts going out the window. Yeah.
Mm. Awesome. Okay. And so what is life like for you right now? You run your own business.
Hmm.
Your boys are out. Your daughter is almost out of the house. What's your relationship like with your wife? And what's your relationship like with the rest of the world?
Well, I think it's better. It's new. I mean, my wife and I we spent a ton of time together. We didn't, traveling and with the kids. We're on a trip now together for the first time, not work related. I don't know when the last time we did that. We went on a lot of trips because the company would always we would always be traveling around the world as a couple. But just us without work or without kids, it's probably been since, early 2000s. So it's a complete rebirth of the relationship. And I think in some ways it's the same with all my relationships. Some of my friends didn't see me for a while, probably skeptical, cynical. Are you really going to be here? Are you really, can I
Oh,
count
because you
on?
were the busy person
Yeah,
beforehand. Yeah.
yeah, of
Mm, mm.
course. I go, then I meet new friends, and I'd be the quiet. My neighborhood thinks I'm an introvert, which is super funny, because if you look at all of my test scores and all my 360, I'm the biggest extrovert on the planet. I'm a vision guy. I'm a, lead with energy. But when you don't know your environment and you're got a lot on your mind and you don't really know where the trust is, a guy like me will go quiet, and I'll you know, keep that contained. So it's a lot of those folks are learning that I'm not an introvert. And so a lot of new relationships and a lot of more honest relationships, I would say.
Mm.
Multiple different men's groups, charitable groups, and my business. I'm trying to build the business out so I don't build a prison around myself and just do it for money. So that's the trick on my business, is getting the purpose, the value, and the service so I can get to people with all my content, but in a way that doesn't make me a consultant or a public speaker all the time, traveling around, trying to build build the wheel again. I want to do it in a more curriculum way, where I can get people to get into the learning and the teaching in a more an easy way. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but I want to take all of my lessons, including what we talked about today, and give it to people in a way they can digest it. And so that's the framework I'm working on at work, which is super fun, but a little frustrating, because I'm used to the big company stuff where I just have a lot of people go do stuff for me, and now it's me and
Yeah, doing everything else.
virtual assistants and AI platforms, and and relearning, and it's scary, but it's super energizing at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. I think you're more focused on the impact rather than, well, the impact on the people that you serve as opposed to the impact on you as the person who are delivering the content.
It is, and I'll tell you something. From time to time, I will come back and I will think about my background. I asked ChatGPT the AI mathematics of I'm sure you've heard the statistic, the odds of a human being a human is like 4 billion to 1 or something like that.
Mm.
So I asked ChatGPT, well, what if your dad was a priest and your mom was a nun? And it said it's incalculable what the odds of you being alive are. There is no odds. And so from time to time, I will think about that. to help me not play it safe on how to help people and how to make impact. When what do you have to lose?
Mm.
So I'm really trying to keep that front and center, but also but do it right, not to get too I don't know, get too lofty on that without getting to people tomorrow. So yeah, impact is certainly front and center.
Yeah, awesome. I can see a lot of your parents' work in you. So well
Thank
done.
thank you. That's very
Um,
kind.
I want to take us back to the young John, maybe the John who has started to question your place in the world, your place in your family, whether if you are as smart as your brother or sister, and how you're going to navigate the world. Knowing all of the wealth of knowledge that you know now, if you can just give one wisdom to that young John, what would you say to him?
You're going to be okay. You're not different. You don't have to prove anything. You go look at the photos of me in those years. I always have a tough look on my face. I always look like I'm going to fight somebody. And that's just insecurity. There's just no need for it. It wasn't all the time, but there's that little insecurity in you that you just say, yeah, hey man, relax. You're gonna be fine. You're just as smart as everyone else. What really should have happened is you should I should have we should have embraced all the different types of ways to learn, which had a stigma around them, which maybe they still do, right? Which is why my mom wouldn't have done it because she didn't want me to be ostracized. And so she hovered over me and got me through. I would take tests twice. I would come in early. She would get teachers to stay late. Maybe a better approach would have been just to take it head on and say, hey, listen, you go test him. He's dyslexic and has attention issues and he's super smart, but give him a different environment to show that. I think that would have been, if that was possible without the stigma bullying stuff, I think that would have been helpful. That's how I feel about it now. And with AI, there's no limits to someone with that kind of learning capability. So yeah, I think just knowing you're fine, you're smart, and you're super capable, and you don't have to prove anything to anybody would have been really nice. And I'm sure they were telling me that because they had good parents, but uh, I just needed to hammer it into my head maybe a little bit more.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, John. And the last question that I always ask all guests in the show is, what is your alpha dad song? So when you have a lot of things going on with your business, your wife needs you, your kids need you in their own respective lives, what one song do you play on the back of your mind to make it through the week?
That is a great question. I'm gonna say it's got to be something soothing for that, and for that environment it would be it may even be something classical to go into pure
Flow.
hey, Zen mode. But usually fired up. I listen to a lot of Metallica and heavy metal with my son. I have a lot of range in my music. I like U2 all the way to classical to some country. But my roots were in the rebellious 80s rock. So I would go with Metallica's Ride the Lightning or From Whom the Bell Tolls, which is a great sales kickoff song with the bells ringing to just go over and take on the world. I would go with that.
Awesome. All right. Well, John Hunter, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed having you on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you for the great questions and very thoughtful approach. It's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thanks, John.
You bet.
This episode of The Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of dark people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.